Hey everyone, welcome back to the Intelligent Conversations podcast. Today I have the honor to speak with Ralph Velasco. Ralph has owned restaurants, sold real estate, has been a financial advisor, and much more. Ralph today is a location-independent professional travel photographer. So I'm sure we're going to learn more about what that is and what he does, so I'm excited. So Ralph, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time to come on today. But
Pleasure to be here.
I want to start with this question. So, first of all, what is a location-independent professional travel photographer, and how did you get started in that?
Sure. So, location independent is just a nice way of saying intentionally homeless. I used to live in Southern California for about 15 years and started my business there. Launched this Photo Enrichment Adventures, my first travel brand that I created when I moved to California. And I was doing that while I was a financial advisor at the same time. And this was 2005 to 2008. And if you remember what happened in September of 2008, we had the financial crisis. And here I am, a newbie financial advisor. And so I was not doing great. It takes a long time, many years to develop that sort of a business. And I wasn't that into it. I'd kind of lost my interest in that part of the business. And then we had the financial crisis, of course, in September 2008. And that was the next day was when I said, okay, I'm going full time as a travel photographer and tour organizer. And I'd already been doing that sort of part-time nights and weekends for 2-3 years at that point. So I'd had a little bit of a following, so a little bit of something to fall back on, but nothing full-time, nothing that could support me full-time. But, I said, I'm just going to burn the bridges and I'm going to make this thing happen. And it, as a financial advisor, you would think that a financial crisis would be a bad thing, but it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me because I decided to do that and kind of burn the bridges and say, okay, I'm going to make this thing work no matter what. I've got no fallback. And so I'd always been a traveler, always been interested in travel, always enjoyed photography. And this was sort of the beginnings of the digital photography boom, which I would say, started approximately in the early 2000s, maybe 2001 or two. And so I said, I think there's people would probably pay me to help them with these new digital devices that they were buying, these 1 and 2 megapixel cameras that we were all sort of getting into back then. Now we have them in our pockets all the time. And so I said, I was living in Chicago at the time. I'd actually, just to back up a little bit, I'd had a restaurant, my second restaurant from 2001 to 2004 was in downtown Chicago. And like 5 months after I opened, September 2001, we all know what happened. September's not a good month for me. No, we all had, this was everyone's problem, of course, but we had the, 9/11, of course, back in 2001. So I had just opened a restaurant in downtown Chicago after 9/11. And so, as you can imagine, everything just went quiet for quite a few months because people thought maybe Chicago would be next. And, so it was a strange time. And, like the worst time to have your business go down quite a bit because you're just, opening a new restaurant. Anyway, to make a long story longer, I was coming up to the end of my 3-year initial lease, and I had to decide if I was going to sign for another 5 years or what I was going to do. And I knew I didn't want to continue doing that, so I sold the business, and then I moved to California to start this as well as become a financial advisor so that I had some sort of an income while I started this, which I knew was going to take a while.
That's cool.
So I hope in a roundabout way, I hope that answered your question.
No, that was great. I love that. I think I always like hearing people's stories because what ends up happening, right, is usually there's that point where it's like, oh crap, something terrible happens. Like in your example, 2 big things that happened in our country, but you overcame them, right? The storm passed and you managed to find something else that has been working for you. So I guess this is my next question kind of to follow up. It's what got you interested in photography? Like what, because I don't think I've talked with a few people that are into that, but what was kind of that initial draw to like, hey, I kind of like this and I want to create a business out of this?
Yeah, I mentioned that I've been a traveler, and I'd been a traveler since I was about 15, and I studied for a summer in Spain. Next summer, I was a volunteer in Peru. The next summer, I was a volunteer in Venezuela. The next summer, I studied in Mexico City. And so I always had a camera with me, and this is back in the 70s, early 80s, quite a while ago, certainly before digital photography. But I always enjoyed photography. My father was a very good amateur photographer and, let me use his cameras and stuff. And because I traveled, I was, of course, always taking pictures, even back then. And I started to get some good feedback about my photographs, and maybe that they were a little bit, better than the postcard or just just sort of the regular everyday shots. And so that encouraged me, even if just a little bit, that maybe this was something I could pursue. But like I said, I'm talking back in the early 80s. And at that time, I thought that becoming, making a living from photography and or travel was about as likely as my becoming a rock star. And so, this is before social media, before the internet, practically before the wheel. And so we were, just using film, of course. But to make, to answer your question, I started getting a little bit of encouragement and thought that, okay, maybe I could pursue this eventually. But I did not pursue it until like 25 years later or 30 years later. And I always say that it only took me 45 years to figure out what I want to do with my life. Most people never do. So I was pretty even happy to, figure it out at 45. But I spent 20, 25 years sort of, having restaurants, doing real estate, doing all these other things, traveling, here and there for my, 1 or 2 week vacations that most of us got. But, it took me until I was 45 years old, and the digital photography boom, which I think, made everyone more interested in photography. And then, someone has to teach those people how to use these new digital devices because no one knew how. So I just had to be 1 or 2 chapters ahead of them in that camera manual and show people how to use their digital devices.
That's cool. That's so cool. So, I mean, this is a question that I just thought of. So how did you get to the point where you're like, all right, let's just travel for photography, everywhere around? Because I mean, I don't know where you are right now, but I asked before we started this that you were in California, but now you travel all over the place. What kind of helped you take that step to make that happen?
To start traveling?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, right, they have an idea of that dream in their head, right? I mean, you talked about how most people don't figure out what they want ever, right? And I think it's maybe they do. It's just maybe they're too scared to take that step. So that's kind of, I guess, what I'm getting at is what kind of took you to say, you know what, I'm going to take this big step to go travel and teach photography and take beautiful pictures?
Well, it was that, that restaurant experience that I had, my second restaurant, it not going super great, and, start having a real slow start with 9/11, deciding to sell the business. What I did is I took a yellow pad and I literally wrote on the left side the cons of what I was doing. I had to have a $5,000 a month retail space. I was selling something that people put in their mouths and could make them sick. I had employees. I had a lease. So I would come home smelling like a French fry every day. So those were things that I said. And on the right-hand side of the page, I said, I want to work from wherever I am. I don't want employees. I only want to count on myself. I don't want inventory. I want to sell a service, not a product. And all those things pointed to, the photography and doing tours. And so I said, I bet people would pay me, to sit across the kitchen table with them, show them how to use these digital devices, maybe go out into the neighborhood, take some pictures, examples, those kinds of things, downloading and all that stuff. And then I started teaching at the local City of Newport Beach adult education program, Santa Ana College, University of California Irvine Extension program, places that I didn't need a teaching degree. And I just taught these, 2-hour classes that it was sort of an introduction to digital photography. And there was actually other people out there teaching about the camera. But I said, I don't want to be another one of those guys in that pamphlet that comes every month about what, local classes are available. And so I said, I don't see anyone teaching how to use their photographic eye, how to develop their eye for photography. So let that guy teach about the camera. I want to teach you how to see and to put that camera to use. And so that's what I thought. I'm not a super technical guy by any standards, but I've got a pretty good photographic eye, and I think it can be learned. Sometimes people say you got to be born with that, but I don't believe that. I think it can be taught. And so that's how I started out, little by little. And I said, you know what, I'm going for this thing.
That's awesome. So on this show, I get like a variety of people that take different approaches to what they choose to do. And I like your approach, how you kind of dipped in the water and kind of see, and then you realize like, hey, I really enjoy this. And I think a lot of people, one, they just don't even try to start. And I'm like, dude, just take that step. Like, you want to do it, right? You kind of, like you said, you listed the pros and cons. Like, now just go test it out, see if it's actually what you want. And I think that holds a lot of people back. So this is another question I come up. How do you get the good, like, eye, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, because you said it can be learned. I'm kind of curious. How does one develop that?
I think that it's about sort of showing before and after pictures, maybe looking at people's photographs, which I do a lot of photo critiques and image reviews. And that's something where, people will submit 5 or 10 images, and I'll look at them and I'll give them my opinion about what I think, those shots are. And sometimes they're great, and I just encourage them to continue doing that. Other times there's little, what I would consider mistakes in, just sort of rules that have been broken. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. All rules are made to be broken, but I would point that out. And so I think that's something that as you learn that, you look at your own photographs or video, whatever, you just start to realize, okay, this looks better than that. And there's reasons that there are these rules, like the rule of thirds and things like that. It's because sometimes certain placement of subjects in the frame are more pleasing to the eye for whatever reason, or make us want to move our eye around the frame to see other parts of it and, dig deeper. Sometimes there's just a very simple shot of just one person and almost a blank background, and that could be a great shot. So it just depends. It's very subjective. And I always say that, I'm going to give you my opinion. This is not gospel. It's only my opinion. If you like the shot, great. But I'm just going to tell you what I think. So
I love that. And so it's almost like an art form, right? Like, you're the artist of your photography. And I think that's cool. So you kind of threw in video there. And that's kind of the next question I have. And that's especially with social media now, like when Instagram came out, I bet that was awesome for photographers like yourself. But now that they're starting to introduce things like video, what's kind of your thoughts on that?
I tried to create followings with Instagram and, Facebook and stuff. And I've got decent followings, but never quite took off like some people for whatever reason. I think I've got a good Instagram feed. I think the pictures there are quality. But Instagram has been great for a lot of people. Facebook is kind of where my clientele is, because my people that come on my trips are typically 40s plus, so a little bit older. And I think those people are still on Facebook, where a lot of the younger people are not. And besides younger people, they aren't going to come on a small group trip unless it's, like a singles thing or something. So I'm not going for those people. But yeah, Facebook's where, my following is and where I'm most active. Yeah. And also now YouTube, speaking of video.
I know, right? So I guess, yeah, that's kind of my question. So videos starting to become more and more like relevant. I'm just kind of asking if that's played a role in how you starting to look at things. Like, are you taking more videos now, or are you still doing photography?
100%. Absolutely. I am taking, I would say 90% video and 10% photos, believe it or not. I have the luxury of going back to a lot of the places that I travel to with my groups over and over again. So in a sense, I've gotten a lot of my pictures. I mean, you can always go back to the same place forever and get different shots, better shots, improve. But for those who know photography and video, you probably realize that they're two pretty different things and two different mindsets. It's very hard because I thought, well, I'll have my camera with me, but I'll also be getting some video. It just doesn't work. Anyone who's tried that probably would agree with me. So I had to, and maybe it's just me that I can't keep my mind on two different things, but I have a feeling it's pretty universal. But I went video because I started a YouTube channel, and I've been taking video for many, many years, 10, 12 years, pretty much as long as we've had video on our camera phones, on our phones, just thinking that one day I'd like to start a YouTube channel. Maybe I could use this content down the road, blah, blah, blah. And so it finally happened. And that's something that during the pandemic, when I wasn't traveling as much, now I was on the road still about 5 months out of the year during the pandemic internationally. But normally I'm on the road 8 to 9 months. But I was concentrating on creating this YouTube channel and launching that. And that's been a lot of work, but it's been fun. And it's been something that I've really tried to sink my teeth into. I think I've got some good content. It's kind of fun, but it is a lot of work. And man, if you're committing to doing a weekly video, as you probably know, or even a weekly podcast, it's amazing how that week comes around every 7 days. And, it's like, oh man, you just got to feed that beast.
Oh, it's a grind. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a beast to get it out there and put content out there that people will enjoy. So I want to get back to that, but you mentioned your groups and stuff. What's it like to go on a group, I'm going to call it photography tour, correct me if I'm wrong, but a group photography tour with you?
Yeah, and I could, I could see why you would call it that. Just a clarification, my trips are not photo workshops, which people may have heard of that. That to me is pretty hardcore, 12 hours a day, every sunrise, sunset, talking photography 24/7, image reviews, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to create a different kind of tour, something that was less intense than that, but still had that photography focus, no pun intended. And so I created a trip that was more for sort of photography enthusiasts, not necessarily hardcore photo workshop people or professional photographers, although I've had some come on my trips. And these people just want to be put in the right place at the right time, have everything laid out for them, and it's very understandable. So I get sort of casual, beginner to intermediate photographers mostly on my trips. And now, more and more are using smartphones. And so I created a second brand called A La Campagna Experiences that is even less about photography and more about cultural experiences. Staying in one, maybe two locations and really doing a deep dive instead of like a 2-week trip to Morocco where we might stay in 6 different towns for 2-3 nights each. It's a lot of moving around, but you get to see a lot, but it's a lot of drive time too. So especially after the pandemic, I think that the idea of packing and unpacking once, maybe twice, staying in properties that are absolutely incredible, like private castles, family estates, wine estates. The property itself is a destination because, when we travel, we can't wait to get out of the hotel. You feel like you're wasting time. I mean, I'm not going to sit at the hotel, right? Well, what if the hotel is 270 acres and it's an 11th century castle that the interior is like a museum and there's a swimming pool and there's grounds with gardens? I mean, you may not want to leave.
Exactly.
But of course, we do have day trips planned, but they might be a half hour, 60 minutes drive, and we'll go visit the local villages and have lunches and dinners and things like that, have wine tastings, olive oil tasting, things like that, have those experiences. We'll always have our cameras with us. So, of course. And but it's a different kind of experience, and that's the a la campagna experiences versus the photo enrichment adventures. A little bit more about photography, but I kind of shot myself in the foot in that some people think that you have to be a photographer, you have to be really interested in photography, you have to have an expensive camera or something to come on my trips, and that's just not the case, especially now with the smartphones.
Exactly.
So that's been taken a little bit of branding, hoo-ha to kind of work out, and I'm still working on it.
Yeah, you got to rebrand, say, all right, yes, I am your photography guy, but hey, let's just go out and experience life, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if I could just mention one other thing, I also created the photo enrichment adventures so that a person that was interested in photography could bring a friend or a spouse who wasn't, and that person wouldn't feel out of place at all. Who doesn't want to be in the right place at the right time, great light, very few tourists about, et cetera, et cetera. And even if you don't have a camera, that's more about that learning to see and appreciate.
So that's kind of I have like a follow-up question. So oftentimes some people, they get caught up, right, and so absorbed in just taking photos, right, with their phone, especially their phone. I mean, I'm sure I kind of have an idea of what the answer would be here, but when's the right time to just kind of put that phone away and just enjoy like the beauty of that's what's in front of you?
Great question. That's another thing that I'm a big stickler about is I say, put the camera down. We spend a lot of money on these trips to go and travel the world, and we see the place through the viewfinder of a camera. So I say, don't be afraid to put the camera down and just experience the place with your mind's eye. I have a saying, travel photography is 2 words. Spend as much time traveling as you are photographing.
Boom.
Because, we go to these places, we might get some really nice shots or video, but do you really remember much, how about a specific meal or a person that you met other than the pictures you might have taken of it? And the more I travel, the more I appreciate that type of philosophy of putting the camera down, just experiencing the place, simply sitting at a bar stool at a really cool pub or, at a cafe, whatever, and watching the world go by. I appreciate that kind of travel more than ever. I'm not one of those people that always has to be on the go, and see everything as much as possible.
I think that's a good thing to live by too, because especially in the social media world, we kind of mentioned that a lot of people, they take these fantastic photos, but it's like when you go talk to them, hey, I saw you took a trip to Europe, they're like, oh yeah, like that, and they can't tell you anything that they did. It was all like literally for the picture, and you're like, dude, like tell me what you did, like that's cool, type of thing. But they can't tell you. It's
that's right. And imagine taking 10, 12 full trips like I do every year. Most people take 1 or 2 trips. You got those 2 weeks off, you go take 1 trip. Well, I'm doing that 10 or 12 times a year, which is, fantastic. I mean, I'm very lucky to do that. But imagine, all those photographs and video I've gotten, and, a week later I'm on to the next trip and I've kind of forgot about that previous trip. And so it's about keeping up with those images and certainly, being there. When I told you I was a volunteer in Peru when I was 16, and one of the things that they taught us before we went there was simply to be here now. And I thought that was great. And obviously what that means is be in the place that you are, not always thinking about the next place or a better place, or, this food sucks, I wish I was at home and I had my mom's food, or whatever, those kinds of things.
Wow. I think that's awesome. And yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people take for granted, especially here in the United States. I think we don't realize, like, there's a whole world out there. And it's big too. Like, there's a lot of people living extraordinary lives, and there's places out there that you just won't even think exist. And yeah, it's a beautiful world out there. And I think some people, like you said, you need to put down the camera and just experience it. Yes, get the shot, but also take the time to enjoy it.
Yeah, and the U.S. is one of the most varied and biggest countries in the world, and we've got just about every, geological feature and, landscape, city, whatever that you can imagine. But in a sense, it's almost a problem because, people just want to stay here and see everything here, and they do forget about the rest of the world and all those other things. And for me, it's about going out, having a new language that I don't understand, meeting people that have cultural differences that I need to learn about, and opinions that are different than mine, and architecture and history. Our country is 250, 300 years old in a sense. I mean, you can go sit on a bar stool in London that's 300 years old, let alone the country or, the culture there. It's funny.
That's awesome. So kind of on that note, I'm going to ask the intelligent question of the day. And I think a lot of people, they kind of like this idea. They're hearing what we're talking about, and they like, hey, yeah, I should go out and travel. I should go experience things. And the thing I think will hold them back is fear, or they worry a lot. What's kind of your advice to kind of help them push through that and, live a life on their terms?
Yeah, I think, when we're home, we're in our home country, we feel safer because we know the language, we know the culture, we know the money system, the legal system, etc. When we're overseas, like I said, those are the things that I like being different. I like, having to figure out the money and the language and the culture, the food. But, sometimes people think, wow, isn't it dangerous over there? Or, man, I'm seeing, Ukraine on the news, or this on the news, whatever. Well, there's not a whole lot of countries that are on the news more than the U.S. and the problems that we've had, especially over the past, 3-4 years and even beyond. I don't buy the argument that it's safer here. And nothing against my country, our country, but that's not necessarily the truth. So don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone, go overseas, try something different, and explore, make mistakes. It's a better time than ever to be traveling because we have the internet and all these websites and YouTube channels that can help us research. When I did that, I don't know if I mentioned, but I did a round the world trip when I sold my first restaurant. When I was 24, I did a 5-month round the world trip by myself, and this was in 1988. Well, I had to call, all these places or send away for brochures. Remember those? There was no internet or anything for getting information. You had to get, hard copies, brochures and stuff from New Zealand or wherever I was going to. So, I feel like, having that information that we have now, it's easier than ever to travel. You could be in touch with friends and family and get, police officer very quickly because you probably have your phone with you. It's unbelievable how easy it is to travel now. And to some extent, I wish it was back in the old days when it was a little bit harder and, it wasn't quite so easy. But, hopefully that'll encourage people to travel more.
I 100% agree. And that's the intelligent answer of the day. And to kind of build on that, I think this is something I've told a lot of people. It's kind of something I believe in wholeheartedly. It's we have all the information we could ever want right now. Why don't we do something with it? Right? Like in the history of the world, we have the most information known to man, and we don't do anything with it.
You walk around and you've got the map of the city you're in on your phone.
Exactly.
Before we had to have paper maps and, be looking like a tourist with that, trying to refold that map and stuff. And it's just incredible what we can do now with all these apps and
yeah,
it's nice.
Well, Ralph, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time to come on. So you've mentioned kind of what your whole group's about, your companies. What's the best way people can find you? Because it seems like that would be hard. And get a hold of you, maybe join one of those groups. What's the best way they can reach out to you and do all that fun stuff?
Yeah, super easy. I've got several websites. I've got photoenrichment.com, which is where you can find the Photo Enrichment Adventures. You'll see all my trips there, even the Alla Campagna experiences. But I have another website at allacampagna.com that has just those trips on it. I also have continentaldrifter.co, which that's the name of my YouTube channel, is the Continental Drifter. If people go to YouTube and just youtube.com/Continental Drifter, they'll find my YouTube channel. And there I've got all kinds of information about trips that I've taken, trips that I have coming up, etc. I love to share the experiences that I'm having in these wonderful places and, entice people to go to these places, whether with me or someone else or by themselves, but just to get out the front door. I can be emailed at ralph@photoenrichment.com. But just so that people have an idea, like I said, my typical group is anywhere from 6 to 10 people, so very small groups. And people are typically 40s plus and even 70s or higher. Just you need to be able to walk pretty good. But those are the kinds of people that are on my trips. They're maybe, you don't have to be, but, they seem to be retired, have an interest in photography, have, the money to travel like this. But I welcome anyone on our trips, but you can always email me if you have any questions whatsoever. Follow me on all the social medias at Ralph Velasco or search for the Continental Drifter.
Awesome. Well, Ralph, thank you for coming on today. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure the people listening also learned a ton about you. So thank you for taking the time to come on.
Let's get out and travel. My pleasure.
Amen
Thank
to
you.
that. So everyone, as you can tell, that is Ralph Velasco. He's a very intelligent person, has great things to say. I challenge you guys, if anything you heard today is interesting or you just want to go travel, to go out there and do it and take Ralph's message there. If you also want to reach out to him, check out his stuff. He dropped the information there for you guys. Stay tuned till next week. We have a great guest lined up for you guys. See you guys next week, and let's get after it. Hey everyone, if you liked this episode and would like to hear more, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button. We release a new episode every Wednesday for you guys to listen to. Thank you guys so much for the support that you give. We could not have done this without you guys. If you would like to be a potential guest on the show, check out intelligentconvos.com and fill out the form there. Thank you guys again, and let's get after it.